The military is a noble profession, highly respected for the significant contributions its members make to society. Yet even in the wildest imaginations of the most deranged minds, no one could envisage a model serviceman who would forsake all dignity, tarnish his honor, and transform into a twisted murderer, shocking the annals of Canadian history. The central figure in this account is Russell Williams, a 47-year-old man who held the rank of colonel and was an esteemed pilot in the Canadian Armed Forces. Trusted with critical assignments, he often flew aircraft carrying key political figures, including the Queen of England and the Prime Minister of Canada. David Russell Williams was born on March 7, 1963, in Bromsgrove, United Kingdom. Then he and his family immigrated to Canada to live. He had to witness his parents' divorce when he was only 6 years old. His mother later remarried a close neighbor and had to move again. Despite growing up lacking love from his father, Russell still showed the qualities of a successful person, successfully completing his studies at school, then passing the entrance exam to a prestigious university in Toronto. In 1987, when he just turned 27, Russell Williams joined the Canadian military with many great ambitions, ready to contribute his youth to national security. The commander recognized Russell's qualities and placed him in the Canadian Air Force Flight School, where he served for 2 years from 1990 to 1991 as an instructor. When he turned 31, Russell Williams started working at Trenton Air Force Base near Ottawa, Canada's capital, before becoming commander of this base in 2009. In the years that followed, Russell's career had many clear advancements. He holds many important roles in the Canadian Air Force, often assigned to fly planes transporting politicians and diplomatic officials at home and abroad. Russell was considered a model military officer throughout his 23-year career. He even took Queen Elizabeth II and the Duke of Edinburgh, Governor-General of Canada, Prime Minister of Canada, and many other officials everywhere on the VIP plane of the Canadian Air Force. Russell is also a lucky man to be married to his wife, Mary Elizabeth Harriman, Associate Director of the Canadian Heart and Stroke Foundation. This couple makes anyone who looks at them jealous because they have a full and happy life. After many years of hard work, they bought a luxury home in the capital city of Ottawa in 2004. Then a short time later, bought a vacation home in the Ottawa suburb of Tweed, just a short distance away. 2 hours, 30 minutes drive. They often spend time there on weekends or in their free time, enjoying a peaceful life away from the hustle and bustle of crowded cities. Russell, in particular, wants to take advantage of coming here on weekends. On days off, he often comes here alone without my wife and stays there for a few days. However, from here, a sick habit was formed and later developed into an intolerable crime. In 2007, Russell's offense began to take shape. He secretly followed young girls living around his area of residence, remembered their living habits, determined the time they went to work or returned home, and then took advantage of the times when the house was empty to sneak in there to enjoy his sick pleasure. But what is that sick pleasure? Russell, a powerful figure with the appearance of a poised and trustworthy man, has a lot to lose. To preserve his image and career, he must be extremely cautious in all his actions, ensuring he leaves no trace and, most importantly, avoids detection. So, he chose to break into the girls' homes with the purpose of stealing women's underwear and adult toys. Russell's first victim was a 12-year-old girl. He snuck in when no one was there and took a pair of pink panties. Even crazier, Russell tried it on and took pictures and videos for the next 3 hours. Finally, he left, of course, after carefully erasing all traces of himself so as not to be discovered. After the first case went through, Russell continued his depraved behavior many more times, in the same way. He broke into many different houses, some places he even visited many times. Gradually, the demon in his heart grew bigger and bigger, devouring the morality of this once admired and respected man. In November 2009, Russell drove from his home in Tweed to a residential area 30 minutes away. He sat in his car and quietly observed a house, waiting until its owner, a woman, left. Once the woman left, Russell sprung into action. With his experience, he easily broke the lock, opened the door and stepped inside. Russell went straight to the girl's bedroom on the second floor, rummaged around, and finally found what he needed: the girl's panties and toys. Not only that, Russell also accessed the victim's computer to steal adult movie videos stored there. After satisfying his pleasure, this time he left a letter to threaten the opponent, an unprecedented action. In the letter, Russell wrote, "If you like, just call the police to arrest me. I will publicly reveal all these embarrassing items to everyone and see if you have any face left to live at that time." These words show that Russell's behavior is becoming more daring than before, not just breaking in illegally and stealing property, but it has become an act of intimidation, endangering physical and mental health, and even the lives of others. The girl returned home late at night after a fun outing with friends and was alarmed to see that the door had been broken. She mustered up her courage and went to check around the house to look for the culprit, but Russell had long since run away. When she got to the bedroom, she was shocked to see everything ransacked, lying everywhere. She was even more frightened when she received a threat from a mysterious intruder. Because she felt unsafe, she did not dare to report to the police but went to a friend's house to stay temporarily for the night. However, she did not know that this was also part of Russell's elaborate plan. The girl's escape made the house an easier target. Russell understood this, so he calmly returned and continued his debauchery with the underwear. He took off his clothes, put on the girl's clothes, and freely posed in front of the mirror, filming and taking pictures for many hours without fear of the girl suddenly returning. A few days later, when the girl returned home, it was too late. Russell got what he wanted, while the girl was scared and couldn't report him to anyone. Just a few days after the incident, now it is the turn of a 21-year-old girl, a single mother living with her son in Tweed in the same neighborhood as Russell. Unfortunately, she became the next victim targeted by Russell. This time, Russell's crime increased to a new level. He did not need to wait until she left the house, but blatantly broke in, even when there was someone in the house. Russell tried to sneak in skillfully without making any noise to avoid being discovered by the girl. Because the two lived very close to each other, he wore a mask to hide his identity. After that, Russell quietly waited in the bedroom. At this time, the girl had just put her son to bed and returned to the room. As soon as she turned on the light, she was controlled by Russell, blindfolded and threatened. "Do what I say. If you don't keep quiet, I will kill you." Russell spoke with his voice deliberately changed so that the girl wouldn't recognize him. Although very frightened, the girl could only do as he asked. She did not forget to beg the criminal not to do anything to harm her little son. Of course, Russell came here not for the boy, but to commit perverted acts. He sat her on a chair and tied her with a rope for easy abuse. After that, Russell forced the girl to pose in many sexy positions, take photos and videos for 3 hours, causing the victim to panic and suffer severe psychological effects. Do you know where Russell went the next morning after committing such a series of terrible actions? He returned to his highly respected Army Colonel image, wearing an Air Force uniform and wearing prestigious medals on his chest, to attend a charity event for the Criminal Intelligence Agency Violation. Russell appears to be human on the outside, but inside He is a beastly devil. During the day, he is a very dignified, polite and popular man, but when night falls, he sheds that appearance to transform into a hunting wolf, performing depraved acts that no one can imagine. Despite his extremely clean appearance, Russell's soul has been rotten on the inside for a long time. 13 days after the incident, the woman called the police to report her incident. She said that she was attacked by a mysterious man right in her own house. He beat her until she lost consciousness, then tied her to the sofa, stripped her of all her clothes, and began depraved acts, including filming and taking photos. Hearing this, the police pieced together the details and determined that her case was similar to recent reports of abuse. All the incidents were committed in the same fashion and by the same perpetrator. However, up to this point, all information about the culprit is still in the dark. All she could give the police was his voice. She suspected the culprit was Larry John, a neighbor who lived nearby. Immediately, Larry John suffered heavy criticism from everyone, to the point that he did not dare to raise his face when going out on the street. Everyone considered him a pervert and looked at him with angry eyes. Wherever he went, Larry John was isolated, cursed at, and even severely beaten. This poor innocent person was suddenly framed. Meanwhile, the real killer, Russell, is still at large, not facing any punishment. Russell even received the trust of the people living in the town of Tweed because he held the rank of colonel, so everyone felt secure and without the slightest doubt. Russell, an old man, fooled everyone with his appearance and continued to secretly commit these depraved acts, even at work. At the Air Force unit that Russell commanded, there was a female officer named Marie-France Comiot, 37 years old, who was his close subordinate. The two worked together on many flights carrying leaders, where Marie was assigned to the duties of a flight attendant. Because he is the direct superior, Russell knows all information related to Marie, from her phone number, home address, relationships, to her work schedule. No detail escaped his eyes, especially when Russell had Marie as his target. Russell broke into Marie's house every time she was away to commit the acts he often did to other girls. On that November day in 2009, Marie's life officially changed forever when she discovered her underwear was no longer in her closet. Even though she checked very carefully, she still couldn't find them anywhere. This phenomenon may make Marie feel strange, but it is not serious enough for her to report to the police. Marie just thought it might have been lost somewhere, or blown away by the wind while drying outside. At the end of November, according to her work schedule, Marie had a business trip abroad. Russell took that opportunity to continue acting and certainly would not be detected. However, that day, Marie suddenly resigned without notice. Russell came and found her still in the house, but instead of leaving to keep it a secret, he was so bold that he secretly hid in the basement with a knife in his hand and ready to commit a crime. The presence of this uninvited guest made the house cat Marie feel uncomfortable because of being disturbed and continuously meow to warn the owner. Marie, out of curiosity, went down to the basement to check but did not expect that Russell was waiting with the murder weapon, a knife. The moment Marie turned on the light, she did not have any defense, so Russell used a flashlight to hit her head so hard that she lost consciousness. He then repeated his trick, wrapping tape around her face, then tying her to a pole and humiliating her. Even though Marie begged in extreme pain, he cruelly stood by and watched the victim gradually die from blood loss without any pity. After the victim died, he quickly cleaned up the crime scene and quietly left, as mysterious as when he appeared. A few hours later, Marie's boyfriend came to the house because he couldn't contact her, and was horrified to find that Marie had been brutally murdered and was lying cold in the basement. He immediately reported the crime and the police investigated, but all clues were erased. The villain plotted so sophisticatedly that he did not make any mistakes. After committing the crime, Russell still pretended as if nothing had happened. He even went to Marie's funeral to mourn her and send his condolences to the victim's family. Those tears deceived everyone, successfully concealing the crime they committed. During that time, the police were still actively investigating the perpetrator who killed Marie. Even an amateur would know that this was not the right time to act, let alone an old fox like Russell. He stayed motionless, returned to normal life as an exemplary man, always completing his work well, and when at home, always knew how to take care of his small family. 2 months later, as things gradually calmed down and few people were interested in Marie's case, the police investigation was no longer subject to rigorous scrutiny. This paves the way for the evil Russell Williams to return to his perverted hobby. His next target was Jessica Lloyd, 27, who worked in administrative duties, supporting school bus operations, living in an area close to the town of Tweed of Russell. Russell cannot forget the feeling of pleasure when torturing victims or doing depraved things with underwear. He was compelled to satisfy that sick pleasure. But this time, Russell's crime tactics changed. He no longer attacked the victim in the house, but kidnapped Jessica and took her to another place. The next day, January 29, 2010, Jessica's company tried to contact her after realizing her unusual absence, but all efforts failed. They contacted Jessica's brother for help. When he and the police went to check the house, they couldn't find her trace. The furniture in the house was disturbed, as if a thief had broken in. Notably, on the path leading to the garage, Jessica's glasses and wallet were found dropped, making the incident more serious. During the investigation, police discovered 2 important details. The first is the man's footprint in the snow in the backyard of the house. The cold weather caused this mark to freeze and appear clearly. Besides, there are also Jessica's shoe prints. The second detail is that the wheel tracks look extremely strange, certainly not the common type of wheels that people often produce and use in homes. From here, it can be concluded that Jessica was followed from afar and kidnapped by a stranger. Immediately, a large search was launched in the town. All forces were mobilized on a large scale because time is money, and the longer it is delayed, the more dangerous Jessica's life will be. Even Russell's unit joined the people. He played a perfect scene, reassuring everyone that they would be safe because the army was here. Russell said in public that our unit will provide the necessary support. This place is protected by our Canadian Air Force. It is truly unfortunate to see this terrible thing happen. However, despite efforts day and night, Jessica was never found. While the search took place, local police remained very focused on the evidence collected at Jessica's house. Because the tire marks were extremely special, they immediately thought of a plan. The police blocked all entrances and exits to the town, leaving only one entrance on Road 37. Any car passing through the checkpoint will be asked to stop for a thorough review. On February 4, 2010, finding the Nissan Pathfinder SUV was not too difficult for the police. Just by looking with the naked eye, they can recognize this special tire, identical to the mark left at Jessica's house. The police officers looked at each other in surprise, silently telling themselves that they had successfully set the trap. But they couldn't reveal it too clearly, otherwise they would let the perpetrator slip away. However, the most important thing at this time is to determine the owner of the car. Who is the person driving the car right now? And when the car window rolled down, the policeman was stunned to realize that inside was Colonel Russell Williams, an honorable man whom they had always respected. Russell still doesn't seem to understand what's going on. He said, "Can you guys do a quick check for me? My son is seriously ill, and I have to go home urgently to check on his condition." Faced with that urging, the police had no choice but to let Russell go through the checkpoint, even though their hearts were filled with a feeling of doubt. But the police later discovered that Russell actually had no children, and everything he said was a lie. On February 7, 2010, Russell was finally summoned to serve the investigation. The person responsible for interrogating him was Jim Smith, a veteran criminal police officer of the state of Ontario. His intervention showed the seriousness of the case, and also stemmed from the reason Russell was an army colonel, so he could not entrust responsibility to the local police. Sitting opposite Jim, in the interrogation room, Russell did not show any fear, but on the contrary, he appeared very confident, constantly chewing gum. However, when mentioned about the similarities between his tire and the traces of the crime scene at Jessica's house, he was immediately confused and quickly confessed. Russell spent the next 10 hours telling Jim Smith about the process of committing his crime and the sick desire that crept into his soul and turned him into a murderer. Specifically, on the evening of January 28, 2010, Russell secretly followed Jessica from outside the house while she was exercising on the treadmill in the basement. At 1 a.m. the next day, January 29th, Russell broke into the house while Jessica was sleeping. He blindfolded her mouth and humiliated her for 3 hours. After satisfying his animalistic desires, Russell dragged Jessica into the car to take her to his home in Tweed. At this time she was still alive and begged for her life to be spared. Russell agreed, but in return, she had to do what he asked, which was to let him rape her for the next 21 hours. After everything was over, Russell went back on his word and cruelly killed Jessica without any remorse. He kept her body discreetly in the garage, and when no one was paying attention, he secretly buried it in the forest of Tweed Town. Russell explained that he decided to plead guilty because he wanted to feel less haunted by what he had done, and more importantly, to ease the burden on his beloved wife. After giving his testimony, he left his wife a message expressing his remorse, hoping for her forgiveness, and asking his wife to continue taking care of the pet cat they had raised all this time. The case file was quickly completed in less than 24 hours. Russell was arrested by police and searched his home in Tweed and his home in Ottawa. Police discovered many notes, photos, and other evidence proving that Russell Williams was the perpetrator in previous attacks. Twice he burned his collection of stolen underwear in open fields near Ottawa, but what was left was more than enough to convict him. The evidence included photos of the room of 2 11-year-old twin girls and 87 sets of underwear stolen from a teenage girl who lived alone. In addition, his computer also stored many image and video files recording scenes of raping the victim. The police paid attention to a few documents, and in them there was full information about Russell's criminal plans. He recorded in detail the date and time of the crime, who the victim was, what he stole, where, everything just like a crime diary. In April 2010, the police began processing the case of this Air Force colonel. Many people in the court who were directly involved in the case heard rumors that their homes were also among the houses that Russell Williams admitted that he had broken in. That same month, Russell tried to commit suicide in prison by stuffing a roll of paper down his throat to suffocate, but failed, after which he was placed under special police supervision. On July 23, 2010, Russell was brought to trial at the Belleville Superior Court, Ontario, Canada. On October 18, 2010, in a trial in Belleville, Colonel Russell Williams was found guilty of 2 murders, 2 sexual assaults, and 82 break-ins. The prosecution presented as evidence many photos Russell took of the victims of abuse, as well as taking photos of himself wearing the victim's underwear in a state of extreme excitement. In some photos, he wore underwear printed with cartoon characters, and others showed close-ups of him wearing silk underwear in a state of high excitement. The prosecution only described the tapes he filmed himself, not daring to show them because they were too sick and violent. On October 21, 2010, Russell was sentenced to life in prison for murder, with an additional 120 years in prison for other crimes. Even after this verdict, Russell did not show any remorse or apologize to the victims. The court ordered the destruction of the defendant's SUV and all records created by the defendant, as well as hundreds of stolen underwear. The court also fined Williams $8,800 Canadian dollars, 100 for each offencer, to be paid into a fund to support victims. When the press reported on Russell Williams' case, many Canadian citizens called for him to be executed, a punishment the country abolished in 1976. Currently, Russell Williams is being held in a maximum security prison in Kingston, Ontario. However, he could still be freed in 2035 at the age of 72, despite having committed terrible crimes. Some analysts believe that Russell cannot be considered a serial killer, because according to the standards of the FBI, the United States and the Canadian Federal Police, a mass murder is defined as 3 murders that occur, according to a certain cycle. So if Russell had not been arrested after Jessica's case and remained at large in society, he would certainly have continued to commit crimes and cause even more horror. Experts analyze this incident as unprecedented, calling him a new kind of monster because no one had ever been successful, had such an enviable social status and honor. In just 2 years, he developed his pathological tendency into murder. The criminal's wife, Elizabeth, was not present at the trial, but her husband's guilt made her life increasingly difficult. In addition to knowing that the husband she lived with for 20 years turned out to be a thief who stole a woman's underwear, killed 2 people, and attacked 2 others, Elizabeth also had to face a lawsuit. One of the victims attacked by Russell, who was lucky enough to survive, filed a lawsuit against the former colonel and his wife, demanding compensation of 2.45 million Canadian dollars. She not only wants to demand compensation from Russell for the crime and the mental harm caused to her, but also accuses them of illegally transferring assets to avoid potential monetary compensation awards, possible in the future. Immediately after Russell was arrested, he and his wife divided their assets. The cheap house in Tweed went to Russell, and Elizabeth agreed to pay her husband $62,000 for his share of the more expensive house outside the city. After this incident, the Canadian military immediately stripped Russell Williams of his military rank. In a special ceremony, 4 soldiers burned the uniform and medals of this criminal. He is the first Canadian officer to be subjected to this symbolic punishment. However, he will still have a pension because Canadian law does not take away this benefit, because there has never been a similar case in Canada, so there is no legal basis to suspend the pension. This fact was made public through the media, causing a backlash from the public. The government finally agreed to pass a bill at the federal level to take away pensions in these cases. From the case of Russell Williams, we must seriously consider human ethics. Not everyone who appears decent and kind possesses a benevolent heart, as sometimes that is just what they want to show us, while their hidden life may contain surprises you could never imagine.